In the darkness of the night Chicago, the city known for its towering skyscrapers and bright, unyielding lights, was eerily quiet that night. The usual hum of traffic had long faded, leaving behind an unsettling stillness. The wind howled through the streets, causing the scattered litter to swirl and the streetlights to flicker, as if they, too, were afraid of the dark. The air was thick with tension, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Adam had been working late at his office. A deadline had kept him in the city long after everyone else had gone home. It was now 3 a.m., and his mind felt like mush, heavy with exhaustion. He needed to get home and sleep. His car idled in the quiet streets of downtown, the engine purring as he drove, the light of the dashboard casting a dim glow over his tired face. As he turned onto Roosevelt Road, a strange sight caught his eye. On the corner of the street, standing under the flickering streetlight, was a woman. She was tall, with long dark hair that cascaded over her shoulders like a veil. She wore an old-fashioned white dress, the kind that looked as though it had been untouched by time. Her hands hung limp by her sides, and her head was slightly lowered, covering most of her face. Adam's stomach tightened. It was late, and the city was empty, but people were still out at night. Though the strange thing was that she wasn't moving, not a single step, not even the slightest sway. She was standing perfectly still, like some kind of ghostly statue. Probably just some homeless person, Adam muttered under his breath, trying to dismiss the uneasy feeling creeping up his spine. But his curiosity got the best of him. He slowed the car and glanced in the rearview mirror. To his horror, the woman was gone. He looked back to where she had been standing. Nothing. The street was empty. His heart raced as his mind screamed at him to keep moving. But as he pressed his foot to the pedal, a flash of movement in his rearview mirror stopped him dead in his tracks. The woman was right behind him. She wasn't standing anymore. She was in the middle of the road, directly behind his car. No sound, no movement that he could see. She was simply there. Panic surged through Adam. How had she gotten there so fast? He hadn't heard any footsteps. He hadn't seen her move. His hands gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled force. He wasn't sure if it was terror or disbelief making his body tremble. But he knew one thing. He couldn't stay here. Get it together, Adam, he muttered to himself. Just get home. Just drive. But the moment his foot pressed down harder on the gas, something far worse happened. Through his side mirror, he saw her again. She was moving toward him, not walking, not running, but gliding, floating just inches above the road. Her white dress shimmered in the pale moonlight as she moved with terrifying grace, her feet not even touching the ground. Adam's heart was pounding in his chest now, his breaths coming in ragged gasps. He slammed the pedal down further, pushing his car to go faster, faster, as if the speed could outrun the fear gnawing at his insides. His eyes flicked between the road and the rearview mirror, but he couldn't escape her. No matter how fast he drove, she was still there, always in the corner of his vision. He glanced again at his rearview mirror and froze. The woman was closer now, too close. She wasn't just floating anymore. She was right behind him, her figure distorting in the mirror, twisting unnaturally. She was no longer walking, gliding, or standing. She was simply there, invisible, except for the cold breath of air she seemed to leave in her wake. Hell no, Adam muttered, his voice trembling with panic. He pushed the gas pedal down as hard as it would go, the car's engine screaming in protest. He sped past empty blocks, eyes focused straight ahead. But the city felt wrong. It was as if the streets were closing in on him, trapping him in a nightmare he couldn't escape. He needed to get home. He needed safety. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he arrived at his building. The engine cut out, and the car came to a screeching halt. His heart was thudding in his chest, his breaths coming in ragged, desperate gasps. Without a moment's hesitation, Adam grabbed his belongings, rushed out of the car, and ran up the stairs to his apartment. He slammed the door shut behind him, locking it twice. The apartment was silent. The only sound was the rapid beat of his heart in his ears. Adam pressed his back to the door, sliding down until he sat on the cold floor. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. What was that? Who was that woman? Then the silence was broken. Ding! His phone buzzed. He almost didn't want to look at it, terrified it might be her. But he couldn't resist. He glanced at the screen. A message from an unknown number. New message. It didn't drop me off. A cold chill crept down Adam's spine. His fingers trembled as he tapped open the message. The words made no sense, but they were enough to freeze his blood. Suddenly, the lights in his apartment flickered. The temperature dropped, the air turning frigid in an instant. Adam's breath came out in misty clouds as his teeth chattered. Then a soft scratch echoed through the silence. Scourge. It came from the window. Adam's pulse raced, slowly, ever so slowly. He turned toward the window, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. The glass was cold beneath his touch, his reflection staring back at him. But something was different behind him. Her, the woman. Her long, dark hair hung over his shoulder, her face hidden beneath the tangled strands. Her mouth was barely an inch away from his ear. And then, she whispered, "I told you. You didn't drop me off." The lights went out, and everything fell into darkness. A scream tore through the silence, but no one heard it. No one saw. What happened next? The morning after. The next morning, Adam's apartment door remained locked from the inside. His neighbors grew concerned when they heard nothing from him, and they called the police. When they broke the door down, they found the apartment undisturbed, except for one chilling detail. Written in deep red letters across the wall was a single sentence. "I finally got a ride home." And Adam, he was never found. Not a trace, not a sound. No one could explain his disappearance. Some say that if you pass by his apartment at night, you can still hear a faint voice whispering in the darkness, waiting for someone to drop her off.